Your ears do not deceive you. You have just entered the Cryptid Creator Corner brought to you by your friends at Comic Book Yeti. So without further ado, let's get on to the interview.
Hey, comics fam, short and sweet here. We have a Patreon, so if you want to help us keep the lights on and spread the good word, you can drop a small tithe in the offering plate at Cryptid Creator Corner Pod over there. Membership starts at $1 per month, and we've got some great extra footage from the podcast dropping soon over there. Link in the show notes, and thank you for your continued support.
Thanks for your donation.
Do you love sci-fi? Are you a horror fan? Maybe you prefer action or fantasy. 2000 AD has it all and should be on your radar. With a whole universe of characters from Judge Dredd and Strontium Dog to Rogue Trooper, Shakara Halo Jones, and many more, every weekly issue you get 5 action-packed thrills from incredible creators such as Garth Ennis, Rob Williams, Alex DeCampi, Dan Abnett, and so many others. Get a print subscription and it'll arrive to your door every week. And your first issue is free, or subscribe digitally. Get free back issues and download DRM-free copies of every issue for just $9 a month. That's 128 pages of incredible comics every month for less than $10. That's like a whole graphic novel's worth. All subscribers get amazing offers like discount vouchers and exclusive product offers. Head to 2000ad.com and click on subscribe now, or download the 2000AD app. And why wait? Start reading today. I'll put links in the show notes for you. My wife just got a cute little challenge coin in the mail from her supervisor the other day with a caption that read, "The strongest steel is forged in the fire of a dumpster." It's a sentiment many of us can relate to in these uncertain and trying times, and I've got first-time guest Alice Darrow on with me to discuss how we can analyze apocalyptic wastelands in comics. Alice has a new 3-issue dystopian miniseries called Tramps: The Apocalypse, dropping soon from Dark Horse Comics, that follows the misadventures of 3 damsels causing much distress to a world set in 2094, ruled by Quest Ragnor, king of males, as terrible dudes seek to do what terrible dudes would do in a scenario such as this. Alice, it's very nice to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Well, did you write the solicits for this? Because the description is so catchy, and the "too sexy for chains" line immediately set kind of this mental scene where Right Said Fred is singing "I'm too sexy," for the inauguration of President Camacho in Idiocracy, because that's what my brain just does.
Yes, I did write the solicitation. I wanted to be really I'm a
Nice.
big fan of Russ Meyer. So, like, I
Okay.
wanted to create, that monologue at the beginning of, Faster Pussycat Kill Kill. I was like, I kinda want this solicitation to be kinda corny, but punchy and silly. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Nice. Well, I know you've been working on this for some time, as is the nature of comics, but it seems like the perfect time to drop some more social satire, although maybe it seems too tragically real about now. Where was your brain at when you started Tramps?
When I started working on this, comic for Dark Horse, it was during the election cycle, and I kept thinking like, "Wow."
2016.
No, this was, 2025, like, this was I started drawing like, the first issue June of 2024. So
Oh,
things
wow. Okay.
yeah, things were really starting to pick up, and I kept telling myself, like, "Oh my god, like, if Trump wins, how am I gonna keep working on this?" And so, of course, when Trump won, it was really, really hard for me to get back into. I had to take a little break because it was so I mean, it wrecked me. And eventually had to force I had a deadline, right? So I had to kind of force myself back into it. And it actually kind of felt good because I was making fun of all of these like incels and kind of manosphere type of
Yep.
men. And so weirdly, I thought it was gonna be really hard for me, and it ended up being kind of a life raft. And it still in many ways is a life raft for me. I'm drawing issue 3 right now. So, yeah.
Okay. So you were able to find some solace in the humor you were able to infuse into the project then?
Yes. I've always felt like when times are tough, I have always looked to humor, um,
Okay.
to help me get through it, and so I hope my comic kind of brings that to people. I know drawing it, it has definitely brought a little bit of hope and joy in my life, I would say, during these challenging times.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was talking to my wife the other night and kind of using the illustration that if aliens came down to Earth, what would the intelligent species be that they would first try to interact with? And we were coming up with cetaceans like dolphins and whales and ants and elephants and bees. And it came up, and I pointed out what they all have in common, which is a matriarchal system.
Mhm.
So that was my filter when I was reading through the advanced copy the other night. Is the message for Tramps as simple as death to the patriarchy?
I mean, I think obviously that's a message. For me, what was really important is also to kind of make fun of these stereotypes that we have like the
Okay.
way we view men and women. Um, even, we have this character called Cecil who's like it's kind of considered like a lesser man because he's softer and doesn't really correspond to like these values of patriarchy. I mean,
Right.
for me, it was really like even these 3 ladies, like, they're each one is like a stereotype of, like, the heroine. You have, like, the smart one, the, like, angry one, the, like, pretty but careless one. So that was kind of a and these are also stereotypes we see a lot, like, in comic books, especially with, like, kind of girl boss, like, kind of feminism, which we'll see in Marvel movies. So that was kind of my inspiration and where I wanted to go with that.
Okay. Yeah, it's a really bold book. I'd even call it a bit confrontational. It challenges that modern male ego in a really effective way. You've got ED medication, small guns as a metaphor for small other things, modern men embracing Viking culture, trying to find, I guess, brotherhood and sense of purpose, religion used as a control mechanism. And my personal favorite was Ragnar's underwear locket with a heart and a keyhole, as if sort of the male phallus is something only to be bestowed on the lucky or the worthy. This is not a reserved portrayal, Alice, at all.
Well, it's funny because there's, like, a trend of, like, men who are, like, unvaccinated not wanting to sleep with vaccinated women, and that was kind of
It's
that
so
was
weird.
my it's so stupid. I saw someone from the manosphere the other day be like, "Be careful sleeping with vaccinated women, like, they could pass the vaccine on to you." So there is, like I mean, there's so much absurdity out in the world, and I think that, like, especially women, like, we get made fun of so much and we just kinda have to take it, and
Yeah,
there's this thing of, like, "Oh, we can't be funny anymore, we can't laugh," and yet when you make fun of a man in any capacity, it's like a tragedy. I mean, when you see, like, Elon Musk saying empathy is a weakness, and then, you say one bad thing about him and he's like, "Oh, don't be
yeah, yeah,
so."
absolutely. Yeah, it's wild. I don't know what socials you're on that you're seeing this. That doesn't come across what I'm looking at quite as much, but maybe that's because I've tuned it off and I'm not on X or anything like that anymore.
I'm not on X. My husband is, so sometimes, like, he tells me, like, X is just the cesspool, like, it's horrible, and then on
Yeah.
Instagram, for some reason, like, I get mostly left-wing and liberal content, but occasionally, um, I'll get, like, a lot of Christian, like, manosphere stuff. It's very weird. I wonder if it's because I did so much research for this book, the algorithm is kind of confused to whether
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, with the three heroines, you have Baby and Belladonna and Babette, and you spoke to some of the different traits that you wanted them to have, and they also have very distinct looks. It came off as presenting, a wide expression of female presentation. You know,
Mhm. It was really important to me. I think I've had this debate pretty much, like, ever since college with my professors, like, how we portray women, and the fact that men, obviously sexualize women a lot in their drawings, and my goal has always kind of been to take that back because apologies, my cat is interfering. My goal has always kind of been to take that back. I don't think that there's anything wrong with female bodies, and I don't know. I wanted to draw a bunch of different, not necessarily like in the stereotypical. I mean, in many ways, like they're very voluptuous, they're very beautiful, but they're also like, sometimes they like the drawings are a little. I try to make them look realistic in their, in their bodies. I try to kind of infuse it with the female gaze as much as possible so that I avoid hypersexualizing them in a very like male centric way.
It's interesting having done the Women in Comics feature that I did in March because it brought to light holes in and a way of interpreting silhouettes for me and as a man in a very different way, and how you can use femme presenting differently, and how that works to create positive image results. So hair seems to be like a big thing, how hair moves, which is not something I really thought about that much previously.
Yeah, it's true. I thought about the hair a lot while designing these characters. I mean, Baby is like an obvious reference to Tura Satana, who's in Faster Pussycat, who I love. I think she's this incredible person. Very fun, very smart. I wanted them all to look completely different and have their own kind of identity through their hair. Also because I play with black a lot, like so had a lot of fun and I had a lot of fun with that for sure. There and I don't know that they're details that men necessarily notice, but I think that
Yeah.
I'm hoping like um I'm hoping people will start to take notice of these things. How I also did something like in the 3 issues that's kind of silly, but kind of a nod to that is like, they always have a different outfit in each issue, and you'll see that it doesn't really make any sense considering the story and kind of what transpires. So
Okay.
just having fun with those things.
Well, that power trio is part and parcel of a solid female team. We see it all the time. Charlie's Angels, Powerpuff Girls, Hidden Figures recently, or Steel Magnolias, if we want to take it back to a more classic reference. What made three the compelling protagonist number for you for this?
That's a good question. I think for me, I thought in terms of the personalities and how they interact with each other, and also, like, it was really important, and I kinda based really wanted to base this dynamic, which again is really close to Faster Pussycat Kill Kill, which is that you have 2 characters that are kind of close, and then you have a third one that is kind of on the outs, which, by the way, they exploit in something like White Lotus, and it works very well because usually 3 people is a disaster, but 3 women
Right.
together usually there's some conflict. Um, and Belladonna was a really important character because I also think, like, especially with the results that we saw about like white women being kind of like ambivalent to politics sometimes, or even joining white cis men and voting for Trump, like it was really important for me to kind of have that representation of like, oh, this white woman in this comic is like, doesn't feel like she's that affected by what's going on. Um, so 3 just it seemed like it was gonna create a lot of interesting conflict and tell kind of 3 different stories of female empowerment. Hopefully that answers your question adequately.
Yeah. No, it does. I always go back. I guess I can't escape it. Whenever we're talking about women, I will always go to matron mother crone as the opposite of the male holy trinity, where we're using religion to illustrate the Son, the Father, and the Holy Spirit, and as a representation of patriarchy. So that's kind of where my brain always kind of gravitates to that concept. So
Oh, interesting. Um, it's funny that you mentioned, like, the Holy Trinity also because I'm kind of a huge inspiration for this is also this, there's, like, this infamous picture of it's Britney Spears, I think Lindsay Lohan and Paris Hilton, and they're, like, in a car, and it's like, "Oh, the Holy Trinity." And so I remember seeing that and being like, "That is so funny," and that's kind of like what these women kind of their, kind of are. I don't know if that makes
Okay.
any
No, it
um
does. It actually brings back memories. I actually work for Britney Spears, so I have more reference than most people do.
But yeah, I really love that because I also tried to put a bunch of different references, especially from, pop culture, kind of girly pop
Yeah.
thing, just because I also feel so much like anything that is feminine is considered so dumb and useless. I mean, I don't wanna go on a rant about Legally Blonde,
No, go
but
ahead.
Legally Blonde is a really good example for me of a movie that is really modern in its take on feminism and that has really inspired me. And it's kinda considered like I mean, up till now, I think people are starting to, see it for what it is, but for the longest time, like, "Oh, that was a dumb chick flick." Whereas, like, no one's gonna go, what's that, Fincher movie? No one's like, Fight Club is a dude flick, and I kind of see it as that. So
Oh, it's a dude flick. Palahniuk in general is a dude writer.
dude writer indeed. And there's nothing wrong with that. But
Right.
I do find that there's so much condescension in regards to anything that's a little bit too, like, pink and femme leaning.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how Legally Blonde being a little bit older now and how girls growing up now will perceive Barbie as one of those milestones when they hit their late 20s or early 30s and how well that dates because everything changes. I mean, my relationship with when I was younger, I was on the road working for rock bands. Palahniuk was probably my favorite writer. It was a hyper masculine time in my life personally. I mean, I wasn't a dick dude. But different time periods in our lives will resonate in different ways. So it's just very interesting to hear about some of those influences of yours and how they're affecting something really, which is fairly recent. If you just started this as sort of a response to this Trump go around, because I remember my response to the last Trump go around.
Well, I mean, I also did a lot of work, like, I mean, I did a lot of more political I was in college during his first term, and I remember doing a lot of, things of kind of that nature, but I didn't come up with this idea until later, and I think I mean, I think we were still kind of talking about him by the time I graduated and first had this idea,
Yeah.
um, but it's funny, when I was little, I was not allowed to have Barbies. My mom was very against them because I do think that there's a generation of women that, if you wanted to survive in the workplace, like, you couldn't really be feminine and you couldn't be femme. It just was not accepted. And so I do think now we're seeing like, hey, I can actually like Barbie and pink things and be very feminine, and be good at my job, and I should be accepted into my workplace no matter who I am and what I like. So, which of course, as we see, upsets this current administration very much.
Yeah. Well, I was curious about this. Finishing up the Women in Comics feature in March that I did, it certainly gave me a better perspective of the challenges of women and femme presenting creators in the medium. And as your own first big comics debut in the U.S. with Tramps, I can't help but think there's at least some part of it that channels your own journey in this classically male dominated industry. Or are you I mean, I don't wanna put a filter on that. Like, I don't wanna be the guy who's speaking too much.
No, no, not at all. I did struggle a lot, and I struggled quite significantly in college with some of my professors. Um, I mean, I'm pretty lucky in that, like, Dark Horse has been really kind to me. I've enjoyed I'm so just for some context, I'm half French, half American. So I went to college
Right.
in France, and I spent a great part of my life in France. And one thing that I love about the US is that there is a level of professionalism that doesn't exist in France. And
Okay.
I worked on a book before I started on Tramps, um, with an extremely sexist editor who essentially, anytime I asked a question, it was not possible. I was being bratty and difficult. No matter what I did, if I did not kind of conform and just say yes to everything, it was going to be a huge problem. And it ended with a very aggressive email basically telling me I was a diva. Um, and so, which, I'm still a little upset about. Um, but so when I landed at Dark Horse, I was kind of like, oh, wow, everyone is being so professional and no one is insulting me and treating me like a like I'm an idiot. But yeah, I struggled on that project quite a bit. My mom was the writer on it, and so I think it was difficult for her too. She's older and grew, obviously, and was in the film industry like in the 70s. So I think she was a lot more accustomed to this kind of treatment. Um, but when I was in college, something I really struggled with is that the way I drew women was so hyper analyzed, and I would see men do these hypersexualized drawings of women, and it would always be like, "Oh, well, that's normal for him, but we're gonna scrutinize your work, but he gets to do whatever he wants." The amount of men that took projects from me, and again, the administration is always like, "Well, you gotta get used to it. That's just how the art world is." And so we, like, perpetuate this cycle of, like, making life as difficult as possible for female and female presenting creators is just it is really tough, and I think it would be really hard to find someone who hasn't run into that kind of shenanigan, shall I call it?
Yeah. All right, everybody, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Let's face it, the comics landscape is a mess right now. I'm the editor-in-chief of a comics journalism outlet, and I can't even keep track of it all. If you are as passionate as I am about indie comics and its creators, you should check out the Lantern Guide. Created on the premise of creating light in the dark, it's going to be the go-to resource to keep you up to date on the projects and the creators that you love. Don't take my word for it. I reached out to my friend Brian Lovell, Poison Ivy artist and indie comics creator, to get his take. Brian, what does the Lantern Project fix?
I'm a dude who loves indie comics, and I know personally, like, I get very frustrated when something shows up in my social media timeline or something like that, and I feel like I can't keep track of everything. So really, the Lantern Project was born out of that. It was an opportunity for me as a reader to kind of like have a place to want to consolidate all the stuff that I wanted to read, all the cool projects from cool creators that seemed interesting and kind of unique to like something that I would like, which is really not super represented everywhere else, but it's all over the indies. Having a spot to go to that felt like it consolidated a lot of those audiences and a lot of those places where I couldn't just get drowned out in the feed of social media seemed really valuable to me.
What's the ultimate goal?
It's really our hope with this project that creators feel like they're able to get in front of readers, and readers are able to get books that they actually want to read with a much easier time of keeping track of them and accessing them.
Catalog is scheduled for a quarterly release, so head over to thelanterncatalog.com to sign up now so you don't miss your next favorite thing. I'll put a link in the show notes for you. Y'all, Jimmy, the Chaos Goblin strikes again. I should have known better than to mention I was working on my DC Universe meets Ravenloft hybrid D&D campaign on social media. My bad. He goes and tags a bunch of comics creators we know, and now I have to get it in gear and whip this campaign into shape so we can start playing. Another friend chimes in, "Are you going to make maps?" It's fair to say it's been a while since I put something together, so I guess? It was then that I discovered Arkenforge. If you don't know who Arkenforge is, they have everything you need to make your TTRPG more fun and immersive, allowing you to build, play, and export animated maps, including in-person Fog of War capability that lets your players interact with maps as the adventure unfolds while you, the DM, get the full picture. Now I'm set to easily build high-res animated maps, saving myself precious time and significantly adding nuance to our campaign. That's a win every day in my book. Check them out at arkenforge.com and use the discount code YETI5 to get $5 off. I'll drop a link in the show notes for you, and big thanks to Arkenforge for partnering with our show.
I think I'm gonna make Jimmy play a goblin warlock just to get even.
Welcome back. I don't think I've talked, I certainly didn't in March, but somebody from your perspective more who's just starting out. The people I interviewed have been in the business for a while. So, what is your take on how we fix it? How do we change and create more opportunities for women in comics?
That's a difficult
I
question.
know it's a big one. It's a big one.
I think I tend to think everything starts with education. I think a lot of girls get into school and they're kind of immediately discouraged. And I think, when you look at the demographic in art schools, it's mostly women. And then the art world is mostly men. And you got to wonder how that happens. And I think it's,
Right.
they're discouraged. They're constantly being put down. I mean, the amount of times, like I said, I got a project just completely plagiarized, and the response was, "Well, you better get used to it because that's how it's gonna be." We also create bitter people. I've run into some women who are in their 50s and who think that every young girl should meet the same fate as them and suffer just as much, and that's just not the way. So I think it does start with schools and making sure we're just as encouraged and we get the same opportunities. Yeah, and also something I noticed is that whenever you pitch anything that has a more femme edge, the response is always like, "What about the boys?" And we never ever ask, "What about the girls?" And we are like a huge demographic, by the way. Like, as we saw with
Yes.
Barbie, like, we pay money to see these things and to read these things. So,
Exactly.
yeah, um, men aren't the only like, straight cis men aren't the only ones, buying comics and going to the movies. So
Yeah, so is form language part of the challenge as an artist? And something that you have encountered where I'm trying to draw something in more of a femme presenting or femme positive way, and that alone creates a barrier that a male artist would just, if they did essentially exactly the same thing, is anybody going to question that?
I mean, I think audiences will question that, but I think, I think now we have people react. They see something sexist, they see something, racist, homophobic, transphobic, like they say something. But I do think that,
Yeah.
there is still a certain generation, like in, you know, studios. I also talk about, I work in animation, so it's something I have seen, and I've seen with my dad too, who's in the industry. I do think people of a certain generation, like they do put a roadblock on that, quite quickly. Um, I mean, I think it's getting a little bit better. I mean, it's hard to tell with this administration because it seems like everything is in a backslide. Um, but when I see something like The Substance, for I know this isn't comics, obviously, but I think, "Oh, actually, like, there's a shot, like, someone let this woman make this movie that's incredible."
Well, in terms of legacy, you just mentioned your dad, and he's one of those cult comics royalty figures, probably the most famous for Shaolin Cowboy, which is a martial arts epic itself in the desert whilst fighting fascists. So apparently that's something that might be in the genes. I've talked to a few other women who are carving out their own careers kind of beneath the shadows of famous fathers, in some cases famous grandfather figures. So was this in a way a nod to his previous work? Putting something in the desert fighting fascists?
It d I didn't do it on purpose, but eventually when I
Okay.
got to the idea, I was like, "Hey, this is actually like I did kind of feel like I was following in his footsteps." I don't draw very many like, he inspires me very much to draw things out of my comfort zone, even if it doesn't always look good. I feel like I learn something every time I draw it a little more. So it is a nod to him. It's difficult being the child of someone who is that talent. I mean, he is such an incredible illustrator. He can pretty much draw anything you can think of. Um, and I kind of didn't wanna hide and pretend that, I got her all on my own. I didn't have any so I thought, I'm gonna lean into it. I feel really grateful that that I have him as a teacher. Um, and as a father, it did and again, I have this great advantage that I can send him what I'm working on and kind of ask him for his opinion, that I know he'll always be really honest with me. So
I'm always curious with people when they grow up in kind of a more famous comics family, if it is something that is nurtured or more of a proximity learning curve, if you will. You watch somebody work and then you're sort of, copying them. It probably varies from family to family, but did you draw together? What's that relationship like?
I mean, I remember being little and, like, he would draw all the time. We'd go to restaurants and he'd draw. There's a really famous, Chinese restaurant in Paris called Miramar, and he would draw on like, paper tablecloth, and so I grew up kinda watching him draw and being like, he can just draw a dinosaur? Like, there's a there's a picture that I really love, and it's of him, and he's, like, using I think it's, like, Crayola or, like and he's drawing on my arm. And so I think, like a lot of nepo babies, you also grow up and are like look at your parent like, "Wow, they do such an inc I wanna do that too." But he never ever pushed me. It wasn't like, "You have to be an artist like me." He really was very nurturing and kind of let me do what I wanted to do, and encouraged me once he realized I wanted to draw.
Yeah, in my experience, artists' parents go in one of two vastly different polarized directions. It's either, yes, I want to encourage you to be an artist, whatever artist that is, whichever medium you choose, and they try to push them in that direction strongly, or it's the complete other side of the coin where it's like, I don't ever want you to be an artist. I would go be a lawyer so you can actually make money.
Yeah, luckily he was, like, pretty mellow and supportive, and, there was a time in I remember when I was trying to get into college where he was, like, a little worried because I was quite a slacker. In high school, I was not very good, um, and he was kind of like, "Hey, you're gonna need that," like, and so but again, I had this advantage where, like, he would force me to go to life drawing. Like, if you wanna make it in this industry, like, you have to work really, really hard, and I really appreciated that.
Yeah. Well, circling back to Tramps, one of the things that I locked into and currently topical for sure is fascism.
Mhm.
And this draws a pretty direct line. We have villains who are wearing KKK hoods or something approximating that, the full on Nazi clone look-alike, only without a swastika. And then you have Quest Ragnor, who looks sort of like Hulk Hogan. Is fascism easier to analyze with a more explicit approach like that, where you can easily pull in some iconography?
Um, I think so, yeah, the thing is, I sometimes just feel things out, and at the time, it felt right for me, and you'll see as the comic continues, like, sometimes I kinda dip in and out of that, like, sometimes they're
Yeah,
just looking real goofy, um,
but they
uh
are goofy.
Yeah. Yeah, they are rea I mean, that's part of the reason is, like, because it is very serious, and drawing, a KKK hood and a Nazi uniform was a decision for sure. I did put him in booty shorts just because he's, like, wearing those boots and those booty shorts just because I thought that I don't know, it brought a little bit of extra kind of goofiness, because I think it would have been a little too terrifying to just have him, like, in a full Nazi uniform. Um, but again, it's also me very much making fun of fascists. I'm, Jewish, so it was important for me to put, like, a Nazi in there.
Yeah, I have a personal beef where whenever we're displaying fascism, it seems like there's a prominence in terms of how it's viewed that's ascribed to if you're trying to do something subtle and it's like subtlety all of a sudden. Oh, this is mentally stimulating and challenging because it is subtle versus a more blunt approach. And I really enjoyed the blunt approach in this book. I thought it was very on point.
Oh, yeah, I I like to be blunt, and I do think like I don't know. I especially now we I just feel like it's so in our face and there's still people who like refuse to see it. I think it's really important to like put the dots on those eyes like Donald Trump is a Nazi. Like I'm sorry. Like I for me there's he's literally following that playbook and it's
Right.
you know there's no subtlety about it, and he says what he wants to do, and he says what he's gonna do, and it's incredible to me that people still, like, will find a way to be like, "Well, he talks a lot." You know? We still have that kind of boys will be boys approach where, like, his whole administration, is kind of like Quest Ragnor and his, like, team of goons. It's
Yep.
not far from the truth, unfortunately. With, like
Yeah, especially when
yeah, I was
small things can do things like crash the global, markets.
because they don't know what they're like, there's an incompetence there that I really wanted to make fun of in my comic book. Like, they're idiots, and it makes it even scarier and worse somehow. It's what was that? I think was it the Guardian article? Was like, I always knew the world was gonna fall to was gonna fall to, like, capitalist fascism. I just didn't imagine, like, the men who do it would be such losers, and I think that's so like, that is exactly what I wanted to do with my book.
Well, it's not all quite so overt. You're peeling back layers of an onion in some ways with more subtly current stuff. You have at first I was wondering what your love of was Volkswagens until I had that moment the light bulb went off and I was like, "Wait a minute. Volkswagen started and the origins there were the German Labor Front, which was the national labor organization for the Nazi party." So I was like, "Ding ding ding."
Yes, I did. I mean, I also just like the design. Like it's for me, it's always a mix of like intention and what I like to draw. I try to find like a good meeting point. I do like have a lot of happy accidents in there. There are like a couple panels where you have like the hood of that KKK bad guy. And then like in the panel over, she's got her like I think Babette has her legs in a triangle over him and it like forms a parallel of the hood. I didn't notice I did that until later. And I kind of when I was starting to design things, I was like, "Oh, I'd like to draw a Volkswagen." And then I was like, "Wait a second, that's perfect actually."
Yep. Yep. They're iconic and they're coming back. I actually personally I would love to have one of those the VW buses, the new electric ones. Love.
Those are awesome. They're really cute and designed well. They're really
Oh
cool.
yeah, they're amazing. Well, another visual landmark that actually stood out for me was the color work in the book, which I found pretty unique. I don't believe I've seen anything quite like it if I'm interpreting it correctly because you're using a single color for detail sort of. My maybe this is my age and my eyes are failing me, but the hue of it starts pink, and as the book progresses, it slowly kind of shifts into more of a lavender hue. So, is that accurate? And if so, why?
Yes, it is accurate and it actually will progress throughout the books. You will
Okay.
see there's a colored it you know, my first instinct was like it needs to be pink cuz obviously I'm playing with all these stereotypes and my husband actually did the color for the book, because I knew he would do exactly what I wanted him to do, and he'd have a bunch of good ideas, and he's coloring it, and he's like, "Hey, what if what would be even more girly pop if the color, like, changes so when you have the collection, it's like a bunch of" um so aesthetically, um, I've also always really struggled with how to color my work. Um,
Okay.
I'm not I'm not great at it, and there's just something about that, like, I felt like he made my drawings look better. I like the simplicity of it. I also put so much work into the line art that it felt right to not have so much color in it, and then at the same time, again, it kind of lended itself to this kind of aesthetic idea that I had. I'm also, like, a huge fan of Daniel Klaus and Ghost World specifically, and I just love
Okay.
the black with the singular color, and so I kinda wanted to do my own version of that.
I dig it. I thought you were gonna say you were going in the direction of a trans flag, and it would change throughout all of the books in that direction.
That's
You can take that. You can say, "Yes, that's exactly what I intended to do
That's
all
what
along."
I'm thinking, but I'm happy that and actually when I think about it, it does 100%. Like, I'm thinking about the colors in the rest of the book and yes, I did not do that intentionally, but I am glad. I'm glad that it came out that
Well, coloring is more of a challenge for you. What is your superpower as an artist?
I would say I my first instinct was to say, like, my discipline. I'm a very
Okay.
disciplined, person. I have to, like, sit down, I'm like, "You gotta draw 5 pages," and I do it. I just that's a good question. I
It's a hard one.
It is a hard one. I think I'm kinda good at drawing, like, disturbing things.
Okay.
I would say discipline, drawing disturbing things, and sometimes I come up with really silly visual ideas that make me laugh when I'm drawing them. Um, so I don't know if that is a good answer to your question.
No, it's a very good answer because I look at the continuum and the progression of artists, especially when you're coming from sort of working in another medium. In your case, this is the animation field, and you've been working on big IPs like Futurama and Disenchantment. So that was kind of what I was curious about and picking with that because your figure silhouette translation is really simple. There's a really nice line economy to it that also speaks of a comfort level that you shouldn't have with your work at your age. It's really really good. So I was wondering, with that confidence and working in animation, how that made you a better comics artist. Coming from that background of doing specifically character design.
Well, thank you very much. I get very self-conscious about my drawing as I'm doing it right now. Like before I went into this interview, I was like, "Oh, it's so bad. Everything I'm doing is so bad."
That's normal.
Yeah, that's what I've, been told, but, animation, I mean, is especially where I'm working at, Rough Draft Studios, which is kind of, they hire young emerging artists, which is really amazing. They hired me right out of college. Um, it is truly a boot camp for learning how to draw because
Okay.
you have to draw something that looks good with shape and not too much line. And so you do learn how to be really um careful with which lines you choose to add because obviously someone's coming behind you and has to animate that. I also learned a lot. I mean, I work with supervising directors who've been like in the industry forever and they're so helpful and they give me a lot of notes that I then take to comics. I get a lot of my inspiration also from the way that I, like, compose my pages from film and animation. Because I also, like, when I have time, I'll look at the storyboards and I look at what the board artists do. Um, I do think it's really important no matter what medium you're working in to kind of branch out as much as possible because you can learn so much from other other mediums. And so I feel like, I feel incredibly lucky because I get to hone my skill every day as well. I draw 8 hours a day.
Yeah, I was watching this thing with Vincent D'Onofrio, and he was, I think it was at WonderCon. It was on TikTok where I found it. But he was artfully dressing down a 20 something who is getting into the artistic field, and basically he's like, I know I'm going to catch flack for this. I know people complain, but artists generally, and I'm paraphrasing, are lazy. And it seems like coming from the animation world, that's just drilled out of you. Deadlines are just what they are, and there's this sort of a pipeline where there are people who are going to be doing this and this and this behind me. So I've got to get this done and I got to let it go. And in some ways, I think that there's a freedom in that that a lot of artists who've come up in more traditional ways are always going to let that question, oh, this is not good enough. So they just won't get it out there.
That is such like a perfect observation. That is extremely true. And my dad kind of told me that when I started out as well, where like sometimes you just gotta finish it. I think the hardest part of doing any project is like doing the whole project, the discipline that it takes to draw something or do something and like you hate it. You hate it. You're like, oh, this is such garbage. But to keep kind of going, and animation really did teach me that because like you gotta be fast. And part of the reason like I'm good at deadlines and I can draw fast is because of animation. And the philosophy I had when I drew this is like I knew nothing I did was gonna be good enough for me, and I just needed to do it and finish it, and do my very best, give it 100%, and I couldn't give myself the time to stop and think about it too much and kind of, "Oh, but am I good enough? Am I this? Am I that?" Just I was like, "Deadline." That's why I kind of like deadlines as well. It's good to know you gotta be done at one point and you don't have any other option.
Well, what is your ambition in comics? What would you like to see your career start to become? Tramps is 3 issues. Let's say it's wildly successful, and I truly hope it is because it's an excellent book. And this gives you your vaulting opportunity to move on and do other things. What would you like to do?
I mean, I would love to continue Tramps to the Apocalypse, because I do leave it pretty open-ended without spoiling
Okay.
anything. I also, I would love to I have many other series ideas that I would like to do. I don't wanna abandon animation because I love it very, very much. So, I think I'd be very happy if I, was able to keep drawing my comic book and keep working in animation. I I don't know, I think that I'd be happy just if people were buying my book and I was able to make more. I'm lucky enough that I have a day job, so I can kind of, do this on the side and be able to live, which I'm really, really grateful for. That's kinda where I'm at right now. Yeah, I'd like to get a series. I'd like to end my because it's a long story that I have in my mind, so I would love to, be able to finish that up.
Well, I certainly hope you get an opportunity to. My own personal take here after reading the first issue of Tramps of the Apocalypse is it is definitely a biting, if cheeky, satirical lens in the future we are precariously hurtling towards, like a semi truck going downhill with rather suspect brakes. It also happens to simultaneously be quite funny and far too good to go under the radar. So make sure you call your shop or order it online. Definitely gets my Yeti stamp of approval. Alice, where can people find you online?
You can find me on Instagram at Dallas, Dalice, Arrow, Arrow. And that is my only form of social media for now. I guess you could also add me on Facebook, but I don't go on there very often. Um, yeah, again, please don't hesitate to follow. I post a lot of memes and sometimes drawings as well, and political commentary.
I think people got political commentary if they've gotten this far in the interview.
I
I
also
think they know what they're in for.
I also sometimes do I am a fashion girly, so sometimes I do, runway reviews and that seem to be like quite
Oh,
popular. And, you know, to me it's also part of comics and character design. So if you're interested in all of that, you can follow me on Instagram.
so do you have a lookbook of fashion stuff you're going to try to incorporate into future work then?
Yes, I have a I well, their looks were very researched. They're all wearing, like I kinda tweak it to be a little more Western, but they're all wearing, like I think one of them's wearing some version of Alaya. I try to, like, infuse my personal hobbies into it.
Yeah. Well, as is a new tradition on the show, I like to end the episode with a shout out to and make it end on a positive note. So this is a a shout out, it could be a thank you. It could be something that inspired you recently. And I'll go first to kind of take the pressure off and make it a little easier and give you a moment to think about. Mine is my dog, Lulu. So yesterday I was having a really, really rough day. And as animals do, they can tell when you're having that off day. And so she came up and just started licking my leg and made me pay attention to her. It's like, hey, I love you. And whatever you're going through, I'm really sympathetic to you. I don't need to know the backstory or anything like that. I just love you and see what's going on. And I'm coming over here and acknowledging your pain. And it made it so much better. So shout out to Lulu.
Who am I gonna shout out? I don't wanna copy you and say my cat, but I might have
But
to.
you can. That's fine.
I would like to special shout out to both of my cats who are terrors, and they make my life very difficult sometimes, but I love them so much and they make me laugh. And, yeah, I feel very lucky to have them in my life, and I'm glad I rescued them. Specifically my little Douglas, who was found in really rough shape. I'm glad he gets to have, like, a life worry-free life, living a luxurious existence.
So, if I might, what was Douglas' situation? I'll give you. I'm just curious because Lulu, we actually got from they call it a rescue that was
Mhm.
in Mississippi, and they essentially had to rescue the dogs from the rescue because they were. I'll spare everybody the grim details, but they were in really, really bad shape.
Yeah.
And when we got her, we had to nourish her back to health, and she's got several broken ribs from clearly where she was struck in some way that never healed right, so they're sticking out on her side, but she doesn't care. She's happy and great and everything like that. But I'm always curious about the background stories about rescue animals because people love that kind of thing.
I got Douglas. We already had our cat Mimosa, who I love very much. She's really smart and very evil. But we were looking to get her little friend, so we went to the Burbank Animal Shelter and we saw this picture of a cat that was originally named Taylor after Taylor Swift, and he had
Okay.
a little nub of a tail. Um, and he just kind of stole my heart. And I found out that they'd found him at the Burbank Mall, and I guess, like, his tail had been badly mangled, and he was having, like, some eye problems. And it just makes me really sad that, you know, I hurting animals is disgusting, and I will knock anyone out who hurts an animal, especially, like, a kitten or it just anyways, he was in really rough shape, and I'm really glad that we were able to, bring him home and give him some love, and now he is a giant cat. He weighs 15 pounds, and he's not
Oh,
overweight. He's
wow.
very big boy, a hefty young man.
He's just big. Yeah, we had a British Blue when I was growing up named Captain Fuzz, he was about that, and he's probably actually about 16 pounds, but he was something else, man. That cat would take on any dog in the neighborhood. He was a badass.
Some cats are not afraid of dogs. Our Miss Mimosa, like, she hung out with my husband's parents' dog, and when he bothered her, she just give him a smack, did not care. She ran the house.
Yeah, they do that. Cats don't play.
No, they do
I
not.
s I'm not a cat person these days as much, because I'm highly allergic to them, but we had them all growing up and yeah, different personalities and they add so much to our lives. So, yay, we got to finish and give shout outs to rescue pets everywhere. So that feels pretty good. That's a positive note for sure.
Positive.
Well,
Yeah.
Alice, thanks for coming on the show today and hanging out with me. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you. I had so much fun. Thank you for listening to me. Hopefully, I didn't ramble or say anything too stupid.
No, no, you're great. Um, Thanks for coming on. This is Byron O'Neill. And on behalf of all of us at Comic Book Yeti, thanks for tuning in. And we will see you next time. Take care, everybody. This is Byron O'Neill, one of your hosts of the Cryptid Creator Corner, brought to you by Comic Book Yeti. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of our podcast. Please rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. It lets us know how we're doing, and more importantly, how we can improve. Thanks for listening.